Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Phillips at Global Optimism, and I'm here to introduce a session on the Three Rio Conventions on climate, biodiversity, and on desertification. These conventions have been pillars of environmental governance, of multilateralism, and platforms for the voices of the vulnerable for years. But there is also a fatal design flaw at the heart of them in that there are three conventions, and clearly they are all interrelated. So we're here to discuss synergies. And synergies, as the late Pope Francis would describe it, is really about integral ecology. So I'd like to read a brief extract from Laudato Si from Pope Francis. It cannot be emphasized enough how everything is interconnected. Time and space are not independent of one another, and not even atoms or subatomic particles can be considered in isolation. Nature cannot be regarded as something separate from ourselves or as a mere setting in which we live. We are nature. So with that, I would like to welcome to the stage the founder and CEO of Change Now, Changemaker-in-Chief, Santiago Lefebvre. Welcome.
Well, the next session you are going to attend is a very special one. When we imagined this session, I wanted to focus on the synergies and co-benefits between the three COPs, the COP on climate, on desertification, and on degradation, land degradation, and beyond, because I am convinced that we can also find co-benefits with the Plastic Treaty and with the UN Ocean Conference, all the great negotiations. At Change Now, our ambition has always been to break down the barriers and break down silos, and this is what this session will be about. During this session also, there will be a second part where we are going to explore concrete action, as was saying Laurent Fabius, implementation. And for the 10th anniversary of the COP21, we worked with the French government on the implementation of one of the last elements of the Paris Agreement, which is the Article 6.4. This is one of the last parts of the Paris Agreement, which has been a victory of Baku. And now, because it's decided, it's time to implement it. And this is what will be also about this session. So, time for implementation. Why to do that? Because definitely this pledge will represent co-benefits. For the action on climate will finance also action for biodiversity and land restoration. And so it is my pleasure to call on stage for this great discussion Agnès Pannier-Runacher, the French Minister for Ecological Transition, Biodiversity, Forests and Fisheries, Simon Still, the Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, Your Excellency Dr. Osama, Vice Minister of Environment and Special Advisory to the Presidency of COP16, and a discussion moderated by Nicolas Camus from Politico. Hi.
Let's do it like this. Yeah. Comme ça. Très bien.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be moderating this panel today. We're here to discuss the three different frameworks for environmental negotiations that were created at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, with three panelists who all have a wealth of experience from working within these three frameworks on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification. Now, I think everyone here can agree that the world has changed quite a bit since '92, and when you look at the direction in which the political winds are flowing today, it's not necessarily towards greater multilateral cooperation. The most recent example, obviously, being the United States decision to withdraw again from the Paris Agreement. But even before that, I mean, last year was a triple COP year, which is quite fitting for the theme of this panel. And all of them were difficult. They were often divisive, especially on finance, and they led to mixed results. And so, to kick us off, I'd just like to address my first question to Simon Steele. In this context, what do you think is needed to allow the multilateral framework to continue functioning?
Well, I think that the first point is that the process is working, as challenged as it is, as difficult as it is. There are many headwinds. But if we look, let's say specifically to climate and progress that was made, first of all, in the lead up to the Paris Agreement 10 years ago, and progress has been made up to this time, and there is no greater example of multilateralism at work than within the climate sphere. Before Paris, the world was on a 5-degree, up to a 5-degree trajectory. After 10 years of effort, as slow as that may have been, as frustrating as that may be, we're currently somewhere on a 3-degree trajectory. We know we need to get to 1.5. This year is a critical moment where we do that reflection over the 10 years, but we also look at the 10 years in front of us. And that will be articulated in the nationally determined contributions, the climate plans that countries put forward that are a product, one, of the Paris Agreement, but secondly, in terms of how, in a nationally determined way, countries interpret that and come back to those commitments that they're willing to make at a national level to get us at least closer to 1.5. But what is key across the board is cooperation at that global level, but also at national and local level.
Thank you. And you mentioned the Paris Agreement. This year is the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And since we just happened to have a French minister on stage, I'd just like to ask, does the French government feel that it has a special responsibility to step up in this difficult context?
Yes, obviously, we have reached this Paris Agreement 10 years ago, and it really moves all of us forward. And we should say that even if we look at signal, if we have some signals that are not positive, such as the United States leaving the Paris Agreement, or a negotiation with frustration in Baku because the Western countries believe we should have done something on mitigation, and the global South think that we should have moved forward on NCQG with more ambition. At the end of the day, what we have seen since 10 years, that the Paris Agreement have succeeded. It has succeeded in moving all the countries and reducing our CO2 emissions. If I take, for instance, France, we have reduced by 30% our CO2 emissions since 1990, and we have reduced by 20% since 7 years. So the acceleration is clearly here because of this agreement. When you look at China, it is impressive how China is moving forward, building new industry, building green industry, maybe picking up this year or less next year, so being far in advance with its own plan. And turning to Saudi Arabia, we know how transforming is your industry today to reduce its CO2 footprint. So even when we come from very different points, in fact, it is working, and we need to be very positive with this frame and the fact that it has not only triggered new transformation within our economic activities, but it has also triggered partnerships within countries so that we can find solutions all together. And that's why I'm still confident that we can manage to deliver new progress in Merem.
So I guess you could say that despite the political headwinds, the wind of change is still blowing.
In fact, on the field, things are moving. And when you listen to the noise it makes, it seems that everything is stopped. But that's not true. And what's happening here is showing that on the field, local authorities, public opinion, and companies and governments are moving in the right direction because they have the pressure of the impact of global change. It's not because we are philanthropists. It's because we can see the impact on our economic and on our assets of the global change. We see it in agriculture. We see it when we have some natural impact, floods, droughts, that kind of thing. So there's no way we can escape the situation.
And now moving on to the core of our discussion with Dr. Sama. In the text that was adopted at COP16 in Riyadh last year, there's a mention of the need to explore areas for greater coordination between the three COP frameworks. What are some of the areas in which you see the most potential for greater coordination?
Thank you. I think there is many areas. One is agriculture, because the agriculture, land is the basis for producing 95% of our food, and actually one of the main areas that is suffering from land degradation is agricultural lands, and it has huge impact, economic and social, as well as it also has huge greenhouse gas emissions. Because, as it has been discussed in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the food supply chain is responsible for 33% of greenhouse gas emission. Now, if you look at the food, we have about 1/3 of our food is either wasted or lost. Lost during the production, transportation, storage, or wasted after it reached the table. And this, is, of course, is a waste of land, is a waste of water, and is a lot of energy and greenhouse gas emissions. So this is an area where we can actually synergize between land conservation, food security, and cut emission. Of course, in biodiversity, if we think about all the forest and rangelands, the vegetation cover is the main anchor point for soil. And of course, the loss of forest is a contributor of greenhouse gas emission, because the amount of carbon stored in the vegetation cover and soil is 3 times the carbon in the atmosphere. So actually, when we lose the vegetation cover, we lose the soil, because 80% of the soil is anchored by the vegetation cover, because we lose 24 billion tons of soil every year. And also, we release a lot of carbon. So this is an area where nature-based solutions can give us, a lot of synergies, focusing on storing carbon, restoring biodiversity, stabilizing soil. And of course, that will have also a huge impact on social well-being, because we have seen that actually drought and land degradation impact mainly rural communities. And this results in migration within the countries or even across the border, causing conflicts and instability. So we see now there is a linkages between food security, climate action, biodiversity, and land and desertification. All is related. So we need this comprehensive look in things, and with the same investment, we can achieve multiple benefits.
Madam Minister, at the Biodiversity COP last year that you attended, first in Cali and then in Rome, there was similar language in the final text, but it also mentioned the possibility of a joint work program between the 3 COPs. What would you like to see included in it if it were to see the light of day?
Well, as already mentioned, there are direct links between the different COPs, because when we move on climate change, we improve the situation of biodiversity. When we move on biodiversity and implement nature-based solution, we have some impact on global climate change. And of course, desertification is a much more transversal issue for any country around the world than we may think, because it is clearly some kind of a frontier we may reach sooner than expected. So the subjects are completely intricate. Having said that, you have very obvious ways of aligning the three COPs. One would be the carbon credit and the biodiversity credit. Carbon credit with negotiation in Baku is now as an approval at the level of the governments. And this is completely a game changer, because as governments, we can ensure the integrity of those carbon credits and give tools to control those carbon credits. Carbon credits can help to improve biodiversity status, and alternatively, biodiversity status can improve the carbon credit or the carbon emissions. And we have launched at Cali and then Rome an alliance around high integrity biodiversity. So once again, there is a tool that is available for the companies and that can help them to align the different COPs, and that can help to finance the developing countries that have no easy access to money. And this is clearly what is at stake behind the 1.3 trillion agenda of Baku. It's not to speak only on public money coming from Western countries. It's to speak about how to align all the financing flows, how to ensure that each time we use $1 or €1, we use it in an effective way without having a negative impact on climate, and possibly having a positive impact on climate, and enhancing the capacity of developing countries to have access to money. And this is what is clearly at stake when we speak about these different COPs. And this is what I want to build on: biodiversity credit, carbon credit, common methodologies, and capacity to embark all the stakeholders, and especially the private sector.
You mentioned carbon credits. Mr. Steele, on the climate side, what are some of the areas in which you see more potential for greater coordination with your biodiversity colleagues and desertification colleagues?
Well, I think we're seeing, and we've seen this over a number of years, a convergence of the mandates from the three conventions. So synergies, commonality is very clear. So when we look at the practicalities of each of those COPs, in terms of the delegates who attend, the issues, the concerns, the opportunities, we're seeing that coming together. So I think that natural process will continue, and however that can be actively encouraged through this party-driven process, I think will be helpful in terms of bringing efficiency to decision-making. But then the next area, and this is where the rubber hits the ground, it is how are these mandates implemented? With 3 secretariats, 3 conventions, we're not implementing agencies, but there are implementation actors out there. The sources of funding that support each of those conventions come often from the same pots. So I think a focus on how we transition from mandates generated through to actual implemented projects on the ground, the design of those projects by those implementing entities need to come together to ensure that the design of those projects reflect the synergies between those mandates, that we break down at a project level all of those silos, so the limited public and private funds that are available are as effectively and as focused in their use to have as greater impact on nature, on the climate, and on people and the economies that are dependent on those. So how, in a very, very practical way, there can be coordination in the field at project level, I think is going to be absolutely key moving forward.
And how do we bridge that gap? What do you think would be the appropriate vehicle for that? Is it a joint work program? Is it a working group working on increasing?
It's all of that. It's how do we conduct our business. So in terms of the 3 conventions, recognizing that common streak, the secretariats have a responsibility. We do work closely together. There are opportunities for us to work even closer together so that we're joining up at a convention level. Recognizing this is a party-driven process, but it's how do we reach out? Each secretariat has a 360-degree view of that environment. And I think we have a responsibility in how we hand off our mandates and what we're required to deliver with all of those other actors who are responsible for the delivery of those mandates at a practical level. So how we engage, how we help that coordination, facilitate that coordination with all actors has high value and will help, again, concentrating limited collective resources to focused, impactful delivery.
Now, we've heard from the Secretariat side. What can you know, Dr. Osama, you were involved in the presidency of COP16. Should the presidencies of the COP take a more active role also in promoting that kind of?
Definitely. I think the presidency, in partnership with the Secretariat, they can do a lot. And of course, it's all about the engagement and involvement. Because all the 3 agreements, objectives cannot be achieved without the involvement of the government, the private sectors, NGOs, the innovators, all actors. And we have to recognize that this is not something good to do. This is something we must do. Between 1970 and today, our consumption of material globally increased by 250%. Now, actually, by July of each year now, by 22, we already consumed all the renewable resources in that year. And from July, we borrow from non-renewable resources. This is non-sustainable. If we look at now, we talked about the 1.5 degrees and how now we are more likely to between 1.5 and 2, and how this is very impactful. But we have to realize now, for example, in the last 500 years, we have degraded around 2 billion hectares. Now, the report it is about 1.2 because 55% of the country is only reporting the land degradation. We have outlook for climate. We don't have any outlook for land. And actually, with the very few reports, we are talking about degrading another 4 billion hectares of land. This means between 2025 and 2050, we will have around 6 billion hectares of land. Imagine we have degraded as humanity 2 billion hectares in 500 years, and we're going to degrade 4 billion hectares in 25 years. And we have to realize now the Food Organization is saying we need around 70% more food by 2050. Meanwhile, we are actually degrading land at this scary rate. We have to realize these facts, and we have to really start to act now. And I think one of the speakers in the previous panel said we should not dislink short term from the long term. The long term starts by the short term. So I think it's urgent, it is linked, and I think the economic models. We have seen the carbon credits and now the biodiversity credit. I think we need more economic models to bring land into the picture as well, stronger. I think the financing, I think implementing on the project level, like Simon said, I couldn't agree more. We have to translate this into the projects, and we should not distinguish between the mainstream and what the objectives of the agreements. We have to mainstream it, because now the production patterns are unsustainable. It's not about just greenhouse gas emissions. It's about biodiversity, it's about water, it's about land, it's about greenhouse gases. All should come into the solution, and all should be mainstreamed. This should come into the production and consumption. Our consumption is unsustainable, our production is unsustainable, and this results into more greenhouse gas emissions. This results in more land degradation, water shortages. You know, the Global Water Organization said that we have 40% water shortages by 2030. This means demand outstrips supply by 40%. Most of the water is consumed by agriculture. Let's look at the subsidies. Simon talks a lot about finance. You know, we are putting today $1.7 trillion every year in harmful subsidies to land. And we are putting $170 billion only to restore land. 1/10. We cannot win this battle at all if we are putting 10 times more money to degrade land by the conventional and improper practices. So we have to change we are now with a change now, and I think I couldn't agree. We have to make the change now, and we have to make it at the project level, at the sector level, and of course, policymakers and the conventions has a big role, that we should really synergize the mechanism. We have to synergize LDN, the land degradation neutrality, with the NDCs, with the biodiversity targets, and we have to really streamline the reporting, because the industry has to see that this is all integrated together. And we have a role both on the government level, on the agreement level, and on the industry level.
And I think we're starting to run out of time, so I'd just like to finish up with one final question for each of you. There's some voices, especially coming from the civil society, have floated the idea of merging the three COPs all together. Is that something you could see happening, yes or no? And if you'd like to complete your answer, it'd be great if you could keep it to one sentence, since we're near the end. Maybe Agnès Pannier-Runacher, if you don't mind going first.
Well, I think we need as many appointments as possible for negotiation. And when sometimes it's difficult to negotiate in one COP, it might be easier to negotiate in another COP. So I push for having common languages, but I think we can manage with three COPs as long as we keep being in the negotiations room, and we know how hard it is sometimes, but I can see each time that we have some progress, and this is what fuels the move forward.
So leaning towards no then. Dr. Osama.
Well, I think we cannot move without the NGOs, without the indigenous people, without the youth and the women. And I'm very glad that in COP16 in December, we succeeded to pass a decision to make indigenous people a permanent caucus and part of the negotiation.
And finally, Mr. Steele.
As Agnès said, there are some very distinct spaces that are created in the three conventions that allow for discussions that cannot take place, or limited progress is made in one, can be made in the other. And that is something that has to be preserved. The other, and this is a political statement, it is a party-driven process. The conventions were born through this party-driven process. They're the ones who determine and decide how we move forward. We as secretariats follow their lead. But the point, and this was raised at the very start, you also cannot ignore the commonalities. And I think it requires very smart working, joined up thinking, joined up action. And there's every opportunity to be able to do that as we currently stand. But there are opportunities also for how these processes evolve so they best serve the planet and people.
It sounds like we're keeping the 3 cups for now. There's still a lot of benefits to keeping the 3 of them. Thank you very much, all of you. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'd just like to ask the Minister, if I may, to stay on stage. Good to see you. Good to see you. Because actually, we've got a very special thing to share with you right now. As many of you know, Change Now is the official celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And as the Minister will well know, one of the hardest things to negotiate in terms of the Paris Agreement was Article 6. And in fact, that was only concluded some years ago in Glasgow. So we've got a very specific announcement that the Minister is going to make alongside, and I'd like to welcome to the stage, Stéphane Haller, who is the CEO of Reforest Action. Welcome, Stéphane. Oh. Okay.
Ouais, allez. Non, parfait. Ah oui, parce qu'il y avait les trucs hauts. C'est comme vous voulez. Maintenant qu'on est ici. Donc c'est moi qui commence ou... Voilà. So thank you very much, and thank you, Stéphane Haller, to be here. To achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and keep a limit to 1.5 degree temperature rise within reach, the science is very clear on the fact that reducing our emissions must be the absolute priority. But as companies and governments reduce their emission, there comes a point where reducing emission is either no longer possible or extremely costly. This is where carbon credits come in to reach the final mile towards net zero. But while carbon credits are no substitute for emission reduction, high-integrity carbon markets can also facilitate the achievement and accelerate the achievement of the Paris Agreement. In this context, I believe that the final agreement reached in COP29 in Baku on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement mark a new beginning for carbon markets. In COP29, 197 parties, that is, all the countries that are around the world, included the United States, including the European Union as a whole, agreed to, within the UN framework, on a robust set of principles that ensures high levels of transparency and environmental integrity. This agreement comes after a period in which carbon credits have faced heavy criticism due to their lack of integrity and fraud, and this has caused the market to crash and to weaken what can be a very useful tool to reduce emissions globally. I believe the Paris Agreement credited mechanism developed under Article 6.4 will complement existing standards and serve as a new global reference for high-integrity carbon credits. We believe that alongside governments, companies have a key role to play to achieve carbon neutrality. More and more companies have taken a commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, sometimes before 2050, 2040, 2045. And they have set obligations for large companies to align their strategy within the objectives of the Paris Agreement. In this context, carbon credits can play a key role in order for companies to reach this final mile of decarbonization. On the occasion of the 10 years anniversary of the Paris Agreement, we call for a Paris to practice moment for concrete implementation of those principles. In those challenging times, it is also crucial to show that we can cooperate globally with clear multilateral rules. We call all actors committed to accelerate mitigation efforts to adopt high integrity practices in their use of carbon credits, considering both the demand and the supply side. We also believe it would be useful to work towards the progressive harmonization of standards towards the ambition laid out in the Article 6.4 regulations. That's why we are launching today the pledge for a coalition for Paris-aligned and high-integrity use of carbon credits. It is based on two core principles. The first principle is that decarbonization first. Actors commit to use carbon credits as a complement while following a net zero target and committing to a net zero target. Secondly, actors buy high integrity carbon credits that are aligned with the Article 6.4 ambition and standards that can help them to accelerate their decarbonization, that can help them to take some commitments in front of their employees, of their supply chain, of their customers. So it enhances the level of decarbonization they are delivering. In this context, I would like to congratulate the following companies for adhering to this pledge on carbon markets, in particular Beko, Capgemini, Française des Jeux, Lidl, Schneider Electric. With this participation, we have a wide and representative diversity of companies, and we have the support of a fund with TCHADIENNE, retail with Lidl, industry with Schneider Electric, and service with Capgemini and Française des Jeux. These companies will be supported by key actors from carbon markets, including Adriata, Climate Impact Partners, EcoAct, EcoTree, Emergent Climate, France Vallée, Yeta, La Belle Forêt, Reforest Action, Stock CO2, Sysfarm, Cnote, and Remoral. I now give the floor back to our moderators who will introduce the next speakers.
Thank you very much, Madame la Ministre. Thank you for your nice words, and thank you for introducing this pledge, which, to my mind, is a change maker, because it highlights the importance of going further than carbon emissions reductions, but going to the next step, which is creating carbon sinks through the usage of carbon credits. And I've got a concern, which is today, for obvious reasons, a number of companies, they prioritize the carbon reduction, which is fair and normal and necessary, but then they wait to end this process before investing into the creation of carbon sinks through the insetting and offsetting markets. And this is a concern to me, Madame la Ministre, because we will not reach the Paris Agreement with this approach. We will be far too late. And even the IPCC tells us on and on and on and again that we need to run the two in parallel. So this pledge is a good reminder of this. And this roundtable is especially significant because it's about unlocking the synergies between the Three Rio Conventions. And the Three Rio Conventions are on climate, on biodiversity, and on land restoration. Now, we know today that we need to consider the three together, because if you focus on one without considering the other two, then you take a risk to damage the other two, especially on biodiversity and on land restoration. So we know that we need to consider the three together. And the good news is there are some solutions today that allow this, that helps us addressing the Three Rio Conventions together. They are the nature-based solutions. afforestation, reforestation, mangrove restoration, agroforestry. These solutions are ready today, they are scalable, and they are efficient. Obviously, they need to be of high quality, high integrity, as you mentioned, but they are scalable and ready today, and there is an urgent matter to act now. 75% of land in the world is degraded. How long can we wait to restore them? So nature-based solutions are key, and alongside the energy-saving solutions, they are ready today. And before I call the first signatories of this pledge, I would like to acknowledge another thing here. It's time, I believe, to step back and to realize the effort that the companies have already done into reducing their carbon emissions. It's time to congratulate ourselves what has been achieved, and we know that it's not perfect, we know it's not good enough, we know it's difficult, and we know it's challenging. But we've done a huge amount already. And I would like, ladies and gentlemen, you to welcome 6 companies that are going a step further, and they reduce their carbon emissions and they invest into nature-based solutions to create carbon sinks at the same time. Please welcome with me the first signatories, and if you can come on stage, please, ladies and gentlemen. Stéphane Paliès from Française des Jeux, Laurent Fayolas from Ardian, Cyril Garcia from Capgemini, John Paul Skelly from Lidl, Vanessa Miller-Spels from Schneider Electric, and Hakan Bulgurlu from Beko. Thank you. Right. Thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure to welcome you on stage. As I mentioned, you're the first signatories of this pledge that you initiated, Madame la Ministre, and thank you again for that. And I would like, if you're happy with this, to invite you to explain why you're here and why you've signed and how you've committed to the fighting climate change, acting on biodiversity and land restoration at the same time, using this pledge. Stéphane Paliès, please, can you spare a few words with us?
Thank you very much. It's actually great to be here, apart from, being part of this impressive group of pioneers, companies that want to lead, and with, of course, Agnès Pannier-Runacher as a leader, as a minister too. So it's absolutely great. We at FDG United, because we are now a European company, we have been committed to carbon reduction for a long time, actually, because we did our first carbon assessment actually as early as 2007. So we've been committed for a long time. We, of course, are committed today on this trajectory of 2/3 of our... we already reduced our emission by 2/3 in terms of direct emissions, and we are aiming at reducing our Scope 3 emission too. So, of course, we do that, but as you say, it's not enough, and you can and you must do other things at the same time and not waiting to be at the end of this trajectory. So we are now working to commit and announce that actually we will devote a part of our net result to not only carbon, not only biodiversity, and I will come back to that, but also to investment in carbon sequestration. Nature-based, I understand, is better. So we'll try to do that. We're in the process of selecting what we're going to announce actually soon, this year, about that. So it's going to become very concrete soon. both in terms of global investment, again in financial terms, and in terms of first project. We strongly believe that there is a very direct link between biodiversity and carbon too, and that's why also during this, this forum, and actually just after this roundtable, I will announce, with the support of Agnès Pannier-Runacher, the third edition of a game, because we're a gaming company, so what we do best are games. Games for everybody, games to talk about important issues. So we'll announce the third edition of our game on biodiversity just after this. So we're working on all fronts, and we are very proud to do that with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stéphane, for all of this, and congratulations for these new amendments. Laurent Fayolas, can you share with us what you do?
Thank you very much. Madame la Ministre, dear partners and company, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you, Madame la Ministre, to have been able to bring all those companies in that difficult topics. You mentioned we're a bit pioneers in that field, but I would say we have chosen high integrity carbon credit aligned with the ambition of Article 6.4, because quality for us is of the essence of those work. Ardian, which launched Averroa, a fund dedicated to investing in carbon sequestration projects, fully support the pledge you're launching and the initiative taken by Carbon Credit Program and project developers to steer the market towards high-quality certificate. This ensures that buyers use and declare carbon credits with responsibility, which is really necessary to strengthen the credibility of the market and enable the growth of the demand. As a participant in the voluntary carbon market, Ardian would be super willing to extend the provision of the pledge taken by the company to our sectors, and thus involve all the financial sphere to enlarge this pledge. We support investments with buyers which demonstrate a credible ambition to align with global goal of net zero emission by 2050 and follow mitigation hierarchy, which is super important: measure, reduce, and offset. In accordance, all of this with framework and regulation. We also, and I will end on this one, we also recognize a lot the role of buyers, of corporate, in supporting this integrity by using and declaring carbon credit with high quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent. And you're right in saying that Paris is leading the world again today. And thank you for that, Madame la Ministre. Vanessa, from Schneider Electric, please go on.
Thank you, Stéphane, and thank you, Madame la Ministre. For Schneider Electric, signing this coalition pledge is really part of a science-based approach. I think that is really key. You've both mentioned the IPCC. We're not at a stage where we can afford to do things consequentially. We're at a stage where we need to do everything at once to be able to address climate change with the urgency that it requires. And so at Schneider, obviously, we're a company that is specialized in reduction. We're an energy efficiency company, we're an energy management company, with an industrial automation company. So reduction is obviously first and foremost, but we've also come to realize that we cannot wait to have reduced enough to then turn around and think about removals. We need to remove as much as not as much, but we need to remove as well as we need to reduce. And for example, to just give a sense of scale, right now, all of the nature-based solutions, all of the forestry that covers, a vast proportion of the land, only absorbs 2 gigaton of carbons on a yearly basis. And the health of a forest, we know, sometimes is depleting, and we see some forests that are emitting rather than absorbing. And we need to go, according to the IPCC, to approximately 10 gigatons in about 20, 25 years. So we need to 5x the amount of removals at the same time that we will need to 5x the amount of reduction. And so this has been very clear for Schneider for many years, that we need to play on both sides. It's like the two sides of the same coin. We need to reduce and we need to remove. So we've been investing in removals for more than 15 years. We were a founder of the Livelihood Funds. And if you ran the marathon last week in Paris, well, the marathon was made, all the emissions related to the marathon were neutralized with carbon removal credits coming from the livelihood funds. And in addition to the investment in nature-based solution, we're also looking to invest in engineered solution because we know that, well, there's just a limited amount of land available on planet Earth at this stage, and so both are going to be required. But not only do we buy carbon removals, we also advise companies. And so, Madame la Ministre, you mentioned EcoAct. EcoAct is part of Schneider Electric, and EcoAct advises, alongside also sustainability, Schneider Sustainability Business, thousands of companies on how to approach a nature-based solution and removal portfolio, and how to have an impact also beyond climate. I like what you said about the Three Rio Convention. I think I would add something else. Really, removals can play a role in most of SDGs. They also play a role in terms of equity, in terms of workforce. When we develop projects on mangrove, we also create jobs, and often these jobs are held by women. We have a project in India of mangrove, where we planted 1 million mangrove, and 90% of the workforce is women. So I think there's also social benefits in addition to biodiversity benefits and in addition to climate benefits that are very critical to what you're helping develop.
It's a very good point. Thank you for highlighting this. I should have mentioned this. Thank you for doing that for me. Cyril Garcia from Capgemini, please.
Thank you, and first thank you, Agnès, for your commitment and leadership in this context. It's not always easy, and we should say it loud and clear. This is the right pledge at the right moment, okay? Because it's a pledge, it's a commitment that helps us to get the balance right. We need to continue to fight for reductions, and we need carbon credits. And then I think it's a matter again of getting the balance right between, my dear Stefan, reforestation and high-tech. We need carbon capture. We need to work on bio-oil. We need to work on CO2 to concrete. So I think it's particular and precisely what this pledge is stating, and it's very important. Now, the last point is the integrity. You mentioned it, but we need, and at Capgemini, we try to be organized centrally and in each and every big countries to manage it, because we had this first wave. Now we know who are the right actors, who are those who are really serious and impactful. And I think in the way we govern it and the way we will understand and evangelize, if I may say, this pledge, the integrity and the ethics of what we do is very, very important. But again, get the balance right, and we like the spirit of this page. I hope that in the next day we will be more than 8 or 6 on stage to promote it. And thank you again, Agnès.
Thank you, Cyril. John Paul, please, from Lidl France.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Madame la Ministre, for the initiative. It's an honor for us to be here today as a first for Lidl at the Change Now Summit. Hopefully the first of many appearances for us. And as far as I know, the first time that a food retailer is also present at the summit. And we heard in the earlier session about the importance of food when it comes to carbon emissions. 30% of global emissions coming from the food sector, a requirement for 70% more food over the next couple of decades. Of course, food retail is going to have a major part to play. And we're delighted to be here, not just to showcase what we're doing, but more importantly, to collaborate and work with other companies who are leading the way, because the next stages of decarbonisation will only be possible through close collaboration. 10 years ago was a momentous occasion in Paris with the signature of the Paris Agreement. It was about 10 years ago as well that we started on our sustainability journey at Lidl, and we launched our sustainability strategy called A Better Tomorrow, or En route vers demain. We've had a lot of initiatives in place over the last 10 years or so, really focused on decarbonising our efforts. In 2020, we set very clear targets aligned to the Science Based Targets Initiative, and we committed to a reduction of 55% in our carbon emissions by 2030 across the entire Lidl group, and we committed to net zero by 2050. Since then, as I say, our focus has really been on decarbonisation within our own network of stores and distribution centres. We're very proud today that alone in France, we have 515,000 square metres of photovoltaic panels on our stores. We're one of the largest owners of solar panels in the country. We have put in place 4,800 EV charging stations across our store network. We have the largest network of charging stations across the retail sector in France. We have committed to, and we've aligned all of our buildings to ISO 50001 standards. So a lot done, and that has led to, as of last year, a reduction in our carbon emissions within the Lidl group already of 52% compared to our baseline of 2019. Something we're really proud of, but we know that that's not enough. We know there's more to do, and the next step for us is really a focus on the Scope 3 emissions, and that's going to need huge collaboration across the supply chain with our farmers that we work with our suppliers, working together collaboratively, and there's no doubt that there's a requirement, or there will be a requirement for offsetting as well as we work towards that net zero target. That's why we're delighted today to be signing up to that pledge to continue our efforts towards carbon reduction, but also committing to offsetting as required to reach that net zero target. And I think at a time of global uncertainty, unrest, political unrest, it's more important than ever for businesses to take a stand like we're doing here today and drive the future positive change together. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Well done for all of that. 52% of reduction. Impressive. Hakan, please.
Stefan, you're out of time, so I'm going to keep this very short. We are part of the problem. The appliance industry, roughly 15% of global emissions.
You're from Beko, right?
Beko,
a furniture company.
So we're the #2 producer in the world of appliances. We have cut our emissions by 50% in the past 10 years, Scope 1, 2, and 3, and we've committed to cut them to net zero by 2050. 90% of that is possible, but until we figure out how to make washing machines that don't need power or refrigerators that cool without power, we will need to get that extra 10% at the end. I mean, we know how to reduce, and we are putting all of our effort and money and capital into reducing. We produce our own power. Our products are becoming more energy efficient, but that extra 10% there will have to use carbon credits. And today, personally, I've lost patience with carbon credits because the way the world is going, with Article 6, I became hopeful that we were going into an infrastructure globally which would work. It got watered down, but now with what you're doing, what's happening, I'm more hopeful that the infrastructure will be in place when we need it. One thing is clear, excuse my language, the shit is going to hit the fan, right? We're not going to be able to stop warming quickly. And when carbon credits become mandatory, we want to have hedged our bets and really reduced our carbon exposure, but also have the infrastructure in place in a dependable, reliant, and honest, open system, which actually this is part of. So thank you for doing it, and we're happy to be part of the signatories.
Thank you, Hakan. And one takeaway, Madame la Ministre, from what Hakan said is, once the carbon credits will be mandatory, legislation can play a huge role in all of that, and we need to make sure that the carbon credits are of a high integrity before we move to there. Thank you very much. It's time to sign the pledge. It should be somewhere here. So shall we stand up, sign it, and we take a picture? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Thank you.